Uno, dos, tres.
You know, what would ever happen to us if we didn't laugh at the dumbest things?
We can't be
Uh,
this dumb. I mean, we can try,
yeah.
but I think it's impossible to be
Ask
dumbest.
our ask ask our kids. We are this dumb. We don't know anything about anything. I had to ask somebody
Oh
today
my goodness.
what a particular emoji means. I don't speak the language of emojis. I'm like, there's water coming out of holes, the shape of the mouth. Are they mocking me? Are they smiling? I don't understand. Anyway, we understand less and less and less.
Yeah.
So
This,
it's we're back after weeks of not doing this.
yes, I miss you, bro. I
I miss
miss
you
you
too, man.
a lot.
I know, but
But
we should hang out and we should do something besides talk about sermons because this is
but you know, yeah,
boring.
but you know, it's glad to see you again, and it's glad to
Yeah.
see you that happy. I love it, and I love that now. The the weather is coming cooler and cooler over there,
Yes.
and
Yes.
hotter here.
Good.
So
It's time that you guys get some punishment for all your sins
some
because
of
we've been paying a heavy price.
it's something. This is not about this show, but something about the climate change that is inevitable. And here, in my area, we have the hottest temperature during summer is probably, I don't know, 28 Celsius, which is something like 80 something,
Right.
for just a few hours. But
Wow.
the weather report guy is saying that probably this summer we will have a couple days with 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is totally like, what? This this is not something that belongs to this area. So yeah, those
Yeah.
who are denying the climate change, yeah, it's happening.
Yeah. They
And
watch the people. I'm convinced that the people who deny climate change are just watching the wrong TV. They're not
probably,
watching the right TV. They're not watching David Attenborough and Morgan Freeman on the many, many, many award-winning documentaries around the cosmos and all this. I guess people, I talked about this on Sunday. I just don't have normal TV habits. So what can I say? Anyway,
yeah.
it's
You know,
clearly heating up.
conspiracy theories are way easier to absorb because that doesn't
Yeah.
require to study anything.
Yeah.
So when
That's
you
true.
need,
That's true.
yeah, to understand science, you need to study some. And I'm afraid that a lot of people doesn't like to do that. But anyways, this is science
Well,
leftovers after
so,
weeks and
but,
weeks.
but that's a nice segue, which is a French word. That's a nice segue into what we were talking about.
Oh,
What people need is a good summary. See, this is the
okay.
power of a good summary. And I think we've been tracking with Jesus through Matthew 21 and 22. We're working our way to Matthew 23. Catherine will do the honors this coming Sunday. And we've worked our way through the exchange with the Herodians and the Sadducees around the coin and whose face is on the coin. And then we skipped over the passage. For whatever reason, the lectionary skipped over the passage of the Sadducees asking about whose wife is she if seven brothers die in the new
Okay.
creation. And they had some esoteric idea about resurrection of the dead and the body, and they needed to fight that out with the Pharisees, and they were trying to leverage Jesus to sort of prove their point. He doesn't bite that bait at all. Last week was the famous exchange where it's now the Pharisees, and they send their legal advisor, or in our text in the English translations, it simply calls him a man of the law or a lawyer. And he asks Jesus an actually a pretty intuitive, a pretty important question. Which is the greatest commandment?
Mm.
And what we have here, I think, is one of my favorite things in the world, which all of you know this if you know me. I love a good summary. I love when somebody takes something complicated and distills it down into something tight. And I think the reason I love a good summary is because my brain capacity just can't hold the whole subject. Or maybe I'm holding too many other summaries or too many other subjects, but Jesus goes on record and he does this interesting little weld job between Deuteronomy 6 and something that came much, much later in Leviticus. And he puts them together, and essentially the algorithm is this. Essentially, the answer is this: love yourself, love others, and love God. Or you could reverse the order: love God with all your heart and love others as yourself. No matter how you spin it, it's the same basic thing.
Yeah.
And as I've thought about this now, it's Wednesday. I'm already off to the races. I'm deep reading, they're right here by me, but I'm deep into reading about 3 books right now that have nothing to do with what we just talked about. And so I'm kind of moving down the road, but here's what has lingered in my heart related to the exchange between Jesus and the Pharisees in Matthew, in the last piece of Matthew 22.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't get in trouble because he uses the Jewish law improperly. Everybody was coming up with ways to distill the law into a single idea. And in some of them some of the great rabbis of all times basically distilled the law and the prophets exactly the same way Jesus did.
Yes.
So it's not in what he brings to that list of essential things. What gets Jesus in trouble is what he leaves out. What he leaves out. Lo que no incluye, ¿verdad? What he does not mention as essential.
What's that?
Well, if you come from a tradition that has taught you that you have to do all of these things in order to find pleasure with God, and all of a sudden someone says, actually, no, it's just this one thing. It's just love in all directions. That can be really insulting if you've made your whole life and your whole religious devotion based around 613 independent concepts, 365 of them prohibitions and 248 of them positive injunctions. The bottom line is you never get a moment off if you're on the prowl for 613 ways to please God.
Right.
And Jesus brings it all the way down to a single concept. It reminds me of Augustine, who's not my favorite theologian. This being the Reformation Day, not my favorite theologian, said a lot of horrible things, but one thing I do love that he said. Augustine, when pressed for a summary on the gospel, simply said, here's what it looks like: love God and do as you please.
Yeah.
Love God and do whatever comes next, because if you love God, you can't do anything less than love your neighbor.
Yes.
And
everything
Jesus,
that you do will be with the love as a background.
That's right. So here is the promise of Jesus, I think. And this would be one of my many summaries as we're coming now to the end of this series and we're working our way up to Advent. So for us, we have the capstone next week of this whole argument with the Pharisees in the temple. And then we have Coho weekend, where Stan and Dana will do the honors, and they're going to talk about leaning on one another in community. We'll have, I think, one more Sunday, maybe 2, and then we're going to move into Advent. But here's what it all comes down to as far as I'm concerned. If God is not mad and there's no sort of list of things that we have to do in order to please God, which I would say is true, then live an integrated life of love. Love up, love over, love down, love all the way around. Treat everything as if it bears the face of God. And of course, that's borrowing from 2 weeks ago or a week ago, when Jesus says, well, whose face is on the coin? Well, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, but give to God everything that belongs to God. Well, how do we know it belongs to God? Well, because his face is on all of it. You can't hate anything or anyone that bears the face of God and claim to be doing pure religion. You just can't. And we see examples of that all over the place.
All over the place.
Yeah.
Well, you and me, we are huge fans of Bishop Spong.
Yes. Shh, don't say that word in public.
and he said he wrote also something like a summary. Also, I just remember the part that has something to do with this part. He said he rephrased the love commandment, just saying love wastefully.
Yes, love wastefully. Woo!
Oof.
That's tight. That's 2 words.
Yeah.
I love that.
I think it's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah, and so what Jesus is describing, and here's why that doesn't sound at all like a religion to us, because it's not a religion. Jesus is not describing a religion. Jesus is describing a way of being alive in the world that is fully aware of where everything comes from and where everything is going. You see, here's the power. Here's the power of understanding a closed cosmos. And I talk about this way too much. I'm aware people are bored. At least it's not Moss, Jeremy, whatever. Here's the power. Here's the power of understanding science as an unfolding of the divine. Here's the power of that. Everything around us comes from the same point of origin, and it's all going back to the same divine presence that gave birth to it. So what do I mean when I say that? An integrated life is a life that understands that all things are folded into all things. And why does that matter? Well, because I can't hate Palestinians that live in Gaza or Jews that live in the West Bank. I can't hate anyone if I am that person. You see, here's where we fall apart. We've not fully understood the degree to which we are all minor tweaks, but the same material of the unfolding of God. We haven't
Right.
understood it. And so when Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, he's basically saying, you are your neighbor. There's
Yes.
no way to hate your neighbor without hating yourself, and no one would hate themselves. We love ourselves. Now, we look out for ourselves. Now, we could have taken this sermon a totally different direction.
But,
We could have
but, but,
said,
but sorry, but there's ah what you're saying. It makes so much sense to me.
mhm,
But we didn't grow up in that kind of tradition. We grew up in
heck
the
no.
tradition of that. It's you versus me. It's like
Yep.
I'm right and the rest of the world is wrong. It's like I have the right things to be safe in
Yeah.
whatever sense people are using the word salvation.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so trying to think that everything is integrated is amazing, but it's like mind blowing
Yeah.
in
No.
a
Yeah.
lot of levels. I mean, yeah,
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. But think of what the gospel means now if all things are integrated. So what this means is we don't live a life that wakes up every day and says, what are the commandments I have to keep in order for God to look at me with love? That's not at all the arrangement. We wake up in the world and we say, how do I properly steward a life in the open awareness that everything around me, including the people in traffic who are on their phone and won't turn, they're all embodiments of the face and the life of God. Imagine for a second. Now, I'm not going to lie. This is deeply mystical material. Jesus was the greatest of the mystics as far as my understanding of what that means. He sees points of convergence, and I don't think he sees points of separation at all. So what he leaves out obviously upsets the Herodians and the Sadducees, and it infuriates the Zealots, which Catherine's going to talk about next week a little bit more. And it definitely didn't work for the Pharisees. The reason is because he left out all of the distinctions by which they allowed themselves to feel like they were the only ones that God was pleased with. So instead of walking an aisle and saying, I'm a sinner, the earth is going to hell, I want to go to some place with white streets and golden gateways, golden doors and whatever. Instead of saying, I want to get out of this, what we are saying when we say yes to a life of spiritual transformation, we are accepting a journey into the dissolution of the safety that comes with a religion that says, I'm the only
mm,
right one. That's what dies on the cross, friends. That's what we have to farewell. That's what has to go away. So that's the invitation when Jesus steps up to the mic and begins to summarize. And what a beautiful question. And listen, I don't think it's hard to say because we don't know, because it comes through decades of distilled oral tradition, then it gets written down by his friends, and it comes to us across centuries in many translations. I don't really know what Jesus was thinking, but one of the gifts of this lectionary fall for me has been to relook at the religious leaders of the day with eyes of compassion. Matthew uses this word hypocrite, which is very close to the Greek word hypocrite, which means someone who has masked identities. Someone on
right.
stage is one thing, and at home they're another thing. I don't think that Jesus is rejecting or pushing these people away. I think the question from Sunday, how do you summarize the law? I think it's a brilliant question. I think Jesus has compassion on those who live in a hypocritical state of disunity within their own identity. And so I think the invitation, and the reason that matters, because like it or not, whether we're Jewish or not, which we're not, we are the religious establishment. And so we've got to let that go. The only way to read the New Testament is to read ourselves into all of the people, all of the personas in the story.
Right.
So the truth of the matter is even we have to let go of the things that even we think make us extra special. We have to let them go now because all things embody the life of God. So yeah, that's a high level of responsibility. That's a lot of gospel for 20 minutes.
That's
I don't know. It was a lot. It was a lot. The better part about
Mhm.
Sunday was that I got to play bass finally, and you didn't see that.
Oh my goodness! Really?
Ah, y'all, music was my first love language in the sense
I
of
know.
understanding truth and transcendence. So, yes, so I woke up Monday. Lamar's like, hey, I called every bass player in Texas and nobody can play. Would you play? That goes to show you how bad I am.
But that's the way to make someone feel like
Terrible.
terrible
Yeah.
and good at the same time. It's weird.
Yeah. That's like when you ask somebody
It's
to
like
prom.
you are
and,
my only choice.
Right. It's like when you ask somebody to prom and you say, listen, I asked everybody I know, including all my sisters, and they all said no. Will you go to prom with me? Anyway, I got to play bass on Sunday. That was fun. And I woke up Monday morning. And I'm like, Lamar, I need to go buy a bass. He's like, I got you, bro. He's got beautiful gear laying around.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no.
I'm going to jump off this video session. I'm going to hook up the bass and start practicing. But it's good to see your face. It's good to see your face, Caesar. We miss you, bro.
Yeah, it's good to see my face. I know that. It's good to see you, my brother. Yeah, I miss you a lot. I miss
I do too.
Trey, Lamar, all the gang out
Yeah.
there, and I miss the church. But you know, it is in the way it is. Amor Original is doing great online.
Good. Good.
We're in the middle of a beautiful series, and yeah, and part of my genetical me is over there. He's
Yeah.
in Austin. He's doing
Good.
some noise.
Well, come.
Noise
I know.
over there.
Mati, I see Mati about 3 times a week. I see him at church, and then I see him for all the 04 Center shows. And so
That's right.
he's doing great. He had a low tire on the Murano the other day, and I'm like, bro, your tire is about 18 pounds low, and he knows not to question me because I can tell when the tire's low.
Yeah.
All right, fist bump. Good to see you.
Oh my goodness! I'm confused. Good to see you.
1, 2, 3.